Hello and welcome to the Data for Subscriptions podcast, where we learn and explore how to run better subscription businesses. I'm your host, Bela Donyan, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Jeff McMillan, who's the Senior Director of Business Models and Pricing at Autodesk, to the show. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jeff, we're going to talk about pricing transformation, business model transformation today, and dive into also Autodesk portfolio to kind of set the context. But before we do that, why don't we spend a few minutes just telling the audience a bit more about you? And personally, I'm a bit curious because I know as an engineer, you started off with more computer hardware. You spent some time at Intel, and then that led you somewhere down the road to Autodesk, and now you're driving business models and pricing changes. So tell us the path to there and what makes you so passionate about what you do today.
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for technology, and when I was growing up, I used to build computers with my dad in the garage, and I have an engineering background, and that's what led me to Intel, working in a semiconductor factory for the first few years of my career. I transitioned over to the business side and worked in consulting at Accenture for a while. And what I really got excited about at Accenture was going in and being able to quickly analyze a business, figure out a strategy, and drive change. And so when I joined Autodesk, I started out in pricing strategy, working with the different parts of the business, learning about them, which I was really excited about. But then we started to transform. We transformed our business, and we went from a perpetual box software business to a subscription and cloud business. We've transformed our channel as well. And so I think what's kept me excited and kept me engaged at Autodesk for almost 14 years at this point is the fact that we continue to transform, and that keeps me learning. It keeps me on my toes. And that's been a really, really exciting ride for me.
Now, I'm personally super stoked about having this conversation with you today because I think everybody relates to Netflix, and we've all heard the story and learned about where it went from VHS tapes and all the way to what we perceive as Netflix today. But with Autodesk, it's a company that's so pervasive with software that is touching so many different industries and basically the daily fabric of society. So with that, perhaps help us understand the breadth of Autodesk portfolio and business, Jeff, before we get into the details.
Yeah, that's a great background. So Autodesk, we're roughly $6 billion in annualized recurring revenue. And we're really building the design and make platform for the future. And so anything that's been designed or built, a product from Autodesk has probably touched that. Our flagship product is AutoCAD. Most people know us for that. We have over 100 products in our portfolio. And so whether it's the building that you're sitting in, that was probably designed by an architect using one of our products. If it's the shoe that you're wearing or the computer that you're using, that was probably designed by an engineer using one of our products. Even if you're watching the special effects in the latest Marvel movie or playing the latest video game, that was probably designed using one of our products. And so kind of going back to the beginning of this, we're a design and make software company, and we're really building software for folks who are designing and kind of making the future.
So I have a bit of a personal admission here. I used to play around with 3D Studio Max, but a long time ago, and I'm going to kind of give away my age here by saying it was more than 20 years back. So that's my experience of Autodesk. I have yet to experience all your other software. But with that, Jeff, so I know that you've made a big shift, of course, from on-prem and licenses to subscription models. So why don't we start there? Talk us through the shift that you've done and why it's been so significant for you guys.
Yeah, so when we started this shift, and you need to keep in mind, this was back in kind of early 2010s, or early to mid 2010s. We were a little behind some of our peers, but we started to look out at the industry and see, well, Microsoft's starting to introduce things like Office 365, Adobe's starting to introduce Creative Cloud, Intuit's starting to move to QuickBooks Online. And so we started to see our peer software companies moving to these subscription models, and we started to get curious. And so when we started going down this journey, we were looking at it from a couple of different angles. We were thinking about building a more resilient business, because if we came out of the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, companies like Salesforce, who had recurring revenue model, they fared much better than companies that had more upfront license-based revenue models. And then the other thing that we want to do is we want to deliver more value to our customers. And so we wanted to deliver more value to them on a recurring basis and make sure they were really getting the value of all the investment that we were making into our products, all the new features that we were building. And so we started to chart out a path. We started initially by looking at some of those peer companies like Microsoft and Adobe and Intuit that I talked about earlier. But then we said, well, what would this look like for Autodesk? What would it look like from a pricing perspective? What are some of the features that customers are going to expect from subscription companies? And we started taking steps to move our business in that direction. Some of that was doing pilots in different parts of the world. Some of that was repackaging parts of our portfolio, which were complex. And that ultimately culminated in us stopping the sale of perpetual licenses and really only selling new subscriptions. And we'd done plenty of research, plenty of homework, ahead of that time. That led to us stopping that sale. Then when we stopped sale of new subscriptions, we had to run a lot of different transition programs. We had to move customers off of their existing maintenance plans and over to subscription. And they got more value when they moved to subscription. They got more usage data. They got better support. They got better administrative features. But we had to move them over because many of these customers, they'd been using the same on-prem perpetual licenses for years. And we had to figure out a way to get them over to the latest and greatest. Fast forward, a few years, our customers have largely moved over to our subscription technology. They're getting the benefit of all of those administrative features, all that usage data that we're including in the subscriptions. And we're continuing to add new customers. In fact, one of the key benefits that we saw, so when we used to sell a box of AutoCAD or a box of AutoCAD LT, AutoCAD was between $4,000 and $5,000 for a license. And AutoCAD LT, which is a lightweight version of our flagship product, AutoCAD, that was about $1,200 for a license. Now for AutoCAD LT, you can subscribe to that for $50 a month. So all of a sudden, we got tons of new subscribers just by virtue of saying you don't have to put down $1,200 anymore. You can put down $50 a month, which in some cases is not that much more than some people might spend on a latte on a daily basis, and get them using our products.
But that's very good that you kind of broke it down in that sense, because oftentimes, we like to use terms as giving more value to customers and so on, but it's not entirely clear what we mean by that. But I think by providing that as a pricing option is a good way to kind of break it down. May I ask, aside from these overall objectives that you already talked about, were there some specific KPIs that you decided upon that you are tracking or used to track when you made that shift?
Yeah, so when we started that transition, there were two key things that we were tracking, and we were reporting on these externally to the investor community. One was the number of paying subscribers. When we started out, I believe we had in the neighborhood of 2 million paying subscribers, and we forecasted this, we reported this out to our investors, because every customer or every new subscriber that we signed up, that was a proof point for our investors that our business model transformation was working. The second key metric that we looked at was ARR, or annualized recurring revenue. And sort of the same thing as subscriptions. That's really a proof point to say our transition is working, because historically, we had revenue that was recognized upfront from selling those perpetual and on-prem licenses. When we start selling subscriptions, those are counted as annualized recurring revenue. And so again, it's another proof point for investors that our strategy was working. I'll also comment that there were other subscription companies that were reporting similar metrics, and we went through a fairly extensive benchmarking exercise to figure out who was reporting what externally, how are they defining it, and then what was the objective of reporting on that metric?
Sure. So one aspect that many companies look forward to when they shift to subscription and its various, let's say, versions, is closer relationship and a daily relationship with their customers. In your case, Jeff, how would you describe the relationship becoming tighter as you shifted towards subscription, as we will get into as well today with hybrid?
Yeah, so with subscription, you have to earn the customer's renewal every year, right? If the customer isn't getting value by the end of the contract, they're not going to renew, and you're going to lose a customer. And so we've gone on a journey with that, specifically around the usage data. We have some consumption models out there where that's very, very important. But we started it out actually on subscription. And I remember the first meeting we had on subscription usage data. We were playing around internally. We'd sat down with our IT department and tried to understand what do we get from Salesforce and Workday and some of our other vendors. So we were able to extract some of that same data out of our subscriptions. And so we had a few customers, and we talked to a few sales reps, were friendly, and said, okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can show this data to the customer. So we went up to meet with a customer that was sitting in Washington State in the US. And I remember they had 50 subscriptions, and we sat down with them, and they were only using half of them. And these two engineers, they look at each other, and they look at the sales rep, and they say, well, we're really glad our CFO isn't in the room because he's gonna have our heads because we overbought. And then we left the meeting. The sales rep yelled at me and said, what are you doing? I'm trying to renew the subscription. You just told them they don't need to renew half of it. But what was really cool about that over time is we evolved the usage data. We figured out what decisions do we want customers to make? What decisions do we want to be able to make internally? So that particular story had a happy ending because the customer came for renewal. They churned some of their subscriptions because they weren't using them. But a few months later, they came back and actually bought more. And they started growing their spend with Autodesk. And the reason they told us they were able to do that was two things. One, they trust us because we're being transparent with the data and we're showing them what they use. The second reason is that they were able to go to their CFO and very credibly say, hey, look, here's what I bought. Everything's in use right now. We've hired 5 more people. We need more subscriptions. And so that budget conversation that they had to go have with their CFO was much easier than it would have been without that data.
I mean, this is a terrific story. In fact, over the past couple of years, it started off more from a media and entertainment side, and on the consumer side, I'm sure you must have felt it yourself, even in terms of subscription fatigue. So what's happened is that as customers, we started to get a bit fed up with the number of subscriptions that we've had. But we've seen a similar kind of impact on the business to business side as well with these licenses. I think the example that you gave is a terrific one, where how we can, by providing transparency of usage, we can earn the customer's respect and loyalty and trust, and by that you can grow that business. Thank you for sharing that. So let's move into more where you are today, because today you're actually providing a hybrid offering. And before we just take for granted that everybody understands what hybrid is, let's define what you mean by hybrid.
Sure. So we offer to most customers, they're able to buy 2 different things. You can go to Autodesk.com right now in your respective country, and you can subscribe to the vast majority of our products for a month, for a year, or on a 3-year basis. In most countries, we also have another option called Autodesk Flex. And Autodesk Flex is really a consumption model. And how it works is you purchase a pool of tokens. Those tokens are consumed when a user opens a product. And so there are over 100 products included in Autodesk Flex. So there's a rate card associated with that. So AutoCAD, as an example, is 7 tokens a day. And so you purchase those tokens, you put them in the account. The administrator has great reporting on which products are consuming tokens, which users are consuming tokens. And so the user has a lot of flexibility because they have access to over 100 products. And then as you start to consume all of those tokens, the admin gets notifications that says, hey, you should buy more. Where we've seen a couple of different applications for this. Initially, when we looked at our usage data, we learned that we had very heavy users of our products that were in the product almost every day or very, very frequently. We also had some light users of our products that were in the product a lot less frequently. And so initially, the use case was, hey, buy Autodesk Flex for your light users. And you think about us, we might have an engineer who's in the product every single day, but you have an engineering manager who's doing a design review maybe once a week. And so, okay, maybe that's a great opportunity for them to buy Autodesk Flex. What we've actually found over time, because Flex has pushed us to improve our usage data and our reporting for our customers, what we found is that customers who buy Flex actually grow at a faster rate. Because they now they have access. They might have just subscribed to AutoCAD before. Now they've got access to over 100 products for a very low price. They can test out a product for a particular project or piece of work that they're working on, and they can go off. And then if they really like it, hey, great, keep using Flex, or alternatively subscribe to that product for a year. And so we're starting to see customers who've purchased Flex really grow at a faster rate than the rest of our customer base.
This is really fascinating. When did you introduce Flex?
So Flex has been out there for about 3 years.
Interesting. And what you've been, I mean, usage-based pricing kind of took off in terms of more like an industry momentum at around that time frame. So guys were pretty early. And what you're saying is that you've noticed that customers on usage-based pricing are actually growing faster than expected, and also you see a different maybe behavior than what you initially anticipated because, for example, light users may be able to use it versus others.
Yeah, I mean, when we first launched it, AWS and Azure were
Yes.
out there, and they were decently big, and so we
Yes.
looked at their businesses, we looked at how much money we're spending with some of those cloud providers and how we spend that money. But yes, we were early to it, and now as we get into things like AI, we've built a lot of the billing infrastructure to be able to handle future AI based services. And so what my team is doing now is, as we work with our product managers and our marketing teams and our strategy teams, is we're starting to think about how do we monetize AI, and what's the best way? What's the best way where the customer pays us in a way that aligns with how they're receiving value. And so a lot of that, the good news is that a lot of the infrastructure is already built. We still have to do the research to figure out the best way, but we've got a lot of the building blocks in place, which is really cool.
So you beat me to the AI question. So if I said, let's go there now, because obviously we've already kind of made the step into usage based.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, all the rage is about AI monetization. Talk us through what's coming here next from you guys when you think about AI based monetization.
Yeah, so as we've gone from, historically we're focused on making a user more productive, right? We're focused on making a designer or an engineer more productive by virtue of using AutoCAD or Revit or
Yes.
Maya or one of our key tools. As you get into AI monetization, you start to think more about what's the outcome that the customer can get.
Yeah.
And sometimes that outcome might not need as many users to get to as it might have historically. And so I think that's where we're spending a lot of time thinking, and we're starting to see examples in industry of this. What is an outcome for our customers? And then how do we measure that outcome in a way that we can agree on and a customer can agree on, and not in a bespoke fashion. When I was a consultant at Accenture, we used to run these supply chain transformation deals, and it was very straightforward. We would tell the client, hey, we're going to save you a certain amount of money, and if we save you that amount of money, we're going to take a percentage of that. That's great when you're doing an enterprise deal, but when you're selling to a large number of customers, that's simply not scalable. And so that's where we're spending a lot of time, thinking, researching, talking to our customers, and trying to understand what's an outcome look like for you, and how is success measured. And then we're trying to use that to back into, all right, what's the best way that we can charge our customers?
Have you by chance gotten any learnings and insights predominantly from when you stepped into more the usage-based or the consumption-based pricing? And I say so because, as the example that you gave, but there are uh, several companies today out there. For example, we'll take an easy one. Instead of selling heating, you might be selling what temperature would you like to have within, the facilities or your house or whatever it might be. So therefore, you're kind of selling more of an outcome, and then you pay for that as opposed to energy consumed. My question then again is, what learnings have you kind of captured as you stepped into more the usage base? Because I can assume that you got quite a lot of insights there.
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece that we've learned is like the patterns at which the customers use our products. That's probably the biggest thing, because what that allows us to do, and we know that the first 90 days are the most critical in terms of making sure the customer gets value, because in some cases the customer might just give up. And so the first 90 days are the most critical towards the customer getting value. And with usage based and building that telemetry also into our subscription products, we can see, is the customer using our products or not? And if they're not, and we look at also the administration, is the user actually assigned to a subscription? But we have a bunch of different trigger set that we can look at the usage frequency and then assign an action. So they're not using, okay, well, maybe they're going to get an email to say, hey, did you know about this new feature? Or depending on the level of customer, maybe a customer success manager or one of our partners is going to call on them.
Yeah.
So the usage patterns and then being able to assign actions to someone, that's probably the most valuable thing, because in a subscription model, it's very important. In a usage model, it's critical, because in some cases you can't even recognize the revenue. I do want to go back to a comment you made about the heating and the outcomes. We're starting to see this, the outcome-based pricing show up in, I'd say, in support software. So Intercom and Zendesk are a couple of examples that we're starting to see where, in those cases, the customer is actually paying for an outcome. In those cases, it would be a case resolved. Can the AI bot resolve the case? Yes, great. We'll pay the vendor $1. There was an interesting discussion at a dinner I was at a couple of weeks ago around that's really interesting. That's a metric that really aligns value with how the customer receives it. Yeah. There's a question: are CFOs really going to tolerate that? Because that's putting a lot of revenue at risk for a company. And the response, this was a dinner held by a consulting firm, the response was, these are the same CFOs that said we don't want to move to subscription from perpetual licenses because the revenue is too risky. So I think we'll get there, but I think we're in a really interesting stage of the market where a lot of different functions, whether it's product, whether it's pricing, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance or sales, have to think through, how do we monetize AI? How do we pay salespeople on it? How do we report on it to investors in a way that they have confidence in the way that the business is growing? So it's a really interesting time in the industry.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent comment from whoever made it at the dinner table, because I do fully subscribe to the same. We're at a point where the main discussion right now, which actually is already attached to usage-based pricing, not so much with AI monetization, but AI monetization will be usage-based anyway. So it's like a different flavor of usage-based, one would argue, is forecasting. But in reality, there are ways, and at least here at DigiRoute, the team is already working on providing the ability to do forecasting based on usage-based pricing. But what it needs, though, is really high-quality structured data. So in your case, for example, at Autodesk, where you have 3 years of what I would assume high-quality structured data, then DigiRoute has a model that kind of can help, based off of that data, project stable forecasting outcomes. And so I think for companies to kind of get to that place, it goes back again to maybe have a bit of a tiresome statement. You need to get your data in order. Otherwise, you will neither make the usage-based pricing work, neither make AI monetization work, and you're probably concerned about forecasting too, as you mentioned. So,
yeah, I mean, ahead of launching Autodesk Flex, we sat down with, I sat down with our CEO and different members of our executive team, and we had so many curves that we had built around how much money does a customer spend if they have a subscription? Yeah. How much money do they spend if they're on Flex? How many days a month do they have to use it? What features do they have to use? And so we spent a lot of time analyzing that data. I will say, though, we've got a good base, but AI is different, because in some cases the outcome is indeterminate, and you don't know how much compute is going to be consumed ahead of launching a job. And so that's one thing, as if we think about companies run like Adobe actually made some announcements at a recent customer conference. We've got limits in there for our credits, but we're not enforcing them, because I don't think they know. And it's speculation on my part, but I think everybody's out there trying to figure this out. And there are some industry examples of companies that have launched something and then had to backtrack because they realize, our costs are actually exceeding our revenue, or, hey, we're leaving money on the table. And so everyone's learning as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in the absolute beginnings of what AI can mean for us. I think there's a lot of interest and, let's say, enthusiasm around that, but it's more in the experimentation phase, even by the frontiers in the industry. But with that, Jeff, of course, you've had a really successful journey. If we even go back to when you started to shift towards subscription and predominantly where you are now, let's talk about some of the challenges, because obviously the journey has not been without its challenges. What would you say are the 2-3 most painful challenges that you'd had to go through as a learning?
So I'd say, so change management was really big. When we went to subscription and to usage, every function has to change. Some more, some less, but everyone has to change, whether it's how we market, how we communicate to customers about the value of the change, how we recognize revenue or communicate to our investors, how we pay our salespeople, even in some cases our terms of use. So So change management is really important, and I've seen this with different changes we've run along the way. It's just you have to bring people along, and there's a balance between sharing too early when you just have a concept and they don't have something to react to, versus sharing too late and the groups are scrambling. And so change management, I think, is the biggest thing. The second, I'd say you hit on it a few minutes ago with the data. Just getting the data right is really hard. Understanding who are your users, who are your customers, what are they using, especially as many larger companies, you see more and more big M&A in the news. Getting to a consistent set of data, because you don't want your customers saying, "Oh, it feels like I'm doing business with 2 or 3 different companies. I want to do business with one Microsoft or one Autodesk or one Adobe." So getting the data right, easier said than done. And then I think the last piece is, is really building for scale. And maybe I'll say automation and systems, but I'll call it building for scale. The things that you can do as a smaller company, you can do them manually. You can do them in dashboards and with staff augmentation. At some point, you hit a size where that's really not scalable anymore. And so you have to think about that from the very beginning. How do I experiment? How do I test and learn and kind of build and iterate my way into the right thing? But then also, how do I have an eye on scalability? How do I make sure I'm putting the right building blocks in place that will allow me to scale my business long term?
That's a perfect segue to the next topic I wanted to get into, which is more around the systems, specifically around quote to cash and order to cash. But before we do that, Jeff, we've gotten some questions that I want to take a minute and address before we get into the next part. So the first question here from Drew is, so I guess Autodesk has a B2C and a B2B business model. Did you notice any difference between your shift from perpetual to subscription between these audiences?
So we're mostly B2B. We are, we do have a lot of very small businesses and small businesses, but we're mostly a B2B business. The shift I'd say that we saw, and I don't think there was a huge difference. It was more around, do you have an IT department or not? Because in many cases, what we found in our larger customers is they had multiple different contracts. Maybe they had multiple resellers, or maybe they just had different departments using Autodesk software. So in some cases, when they were transitioning over, versus a small business that said, "Fine, I used to buy this, and now I'm going to buy a subscription." That's I don't have to do a whole lot. In many cases, our larger customers would say, "Well, hey, I'm in the middle of an SAP upgrade. I'm going to wait a couple of years to change over," or, "Hey, I've got 3 or 4 different servers managing Autodesk software. I want to consolidate all of those into one, and then I'll transition over." So I don't think it was a fundamental difference. It was just more of a timing considerations that we saw.
Let's take a second question from Drew as well, and then we'll go for some more before we move on, Jeff. So the second question from Drew is, did you wrestle with the conflation between moving from perpetual to subscription and moving from on-premise to cloud, as he notices that some people kind of mix up license model change with delivery model change?
So most of so let's say this the right way. For many of our products, such as AutoCAD and Revit, I'd say they're still the core desktop products. I'd say they're cloudy, but I'd say it's more of a license model change than a fundamental delivery change. We have built a number of different cloud products, and we've also acquired a number of different cloud products over the years. But when we talk about the business model transition, it's really about a license model transition, and I'd say a little bit less, about the delivery model. Though our products, like I said, they are cloudy.
Okay, so we have another question here from Dhananjay, and he's wondering if a customer decides to subscribe to a product after trying it through Flex, are they able to use their tokens to perhaps pay for the subscription, or maybe get a discount rate if they wish to use their tokens that way? That's an excellent question. I like that. It's pricing complexity.
Yeah. Not right now. To answer the question a bit more directly, today, customer when we started out with Flex, we started out with a much higher minimum spend, Now the minimum spend to get into Flex is $300 or 100 tokens. And so today, a customer can't trade in the remaining tokens to get credit towards the subscription. Oh, that is something I will say. We were just at our annual customer conference a few weeks ago, and that was something that customers asked for.
Who knows? Maybe Dhananjay was at your customer conference. Maybe we'll drop that in the chat for us. Okay, so with that, let's move on back to the discussion that we had. And where I wanted to go here next is to talk about the systems that would enable you to kind of grow and scale, as you mentioned. And what I'm specifically curious about is you said, for example, that you've already kind of set up your billing system to be able to cater for usage-based pricing and to make sure that also you get the data right. As a starting point, walk us through how your quote to cash system landscape looked like.
Yeah, well, before I get into quote to cash, let me talk a little bit about some of that usage data, because I think there's a part of our transition that doesn't get a lot of airtime, but was very important. We used to have very much serial number based licensing, and at one point when we moved over to subscription, we moved to more of a user based licensing, and what that meant is similar to other cloud products. You have an admin console. We call that Autodesk account. You have a group of users and you assign those to AutoCAD or Revit or Inventor or whatever product you have. And so we move customers over to that user-based licensing. That was real, and that licensing is also based in the cloud. And going back to the other question around, are the products still desktop? How's the delivery work? So licensing based in the cloud, and the users have to log in. That was a really important building block for us, because now, because we know who the users are, that gives the admins control over who's using what. Let's say somebody leaves the company, great, I revoke their access and I give it to a different employee. The other thing it allows us to do is to attribute usage data, because we can see who's using what. We can give reports back to the admins about which version of a user's on, which products they're using, how frequently using it. So it allows them to make better purchasing decisions. So that was kind of I'd say a quieter thing that we did. But really it was a key building block here. In terms of our landscape, we're an SAP shop. We have also implemented Salesforce CPQ for quoting. And so how that works is, regardless of whether it's usage-based or a subscription, in most of our markets, what happens is a partner will go in, they will put in the customer information. They will put in a quote for the product, the number of subscriptions, or in the case of Flex, they'll put in for a certain number of tokens. Volume discounts are baked in, so depending on the quantity of tokens that a customer purchases, they'll get a larger discount. They'll use Salesforce CPQ for that. They'll submit the quote to the customer, and then the customer has 30 days to accept that quote. And what we're starting to do now with that data is we're starting to use it to improve our forecasts. We're looking at how many quotes are generated before an order is actually placed. How long does it take from a quote being issued to an order to be closed? And can we actually, what's the close rate on these quotes? And so we're starting to look at that data to understand, hey, can we actually use it to improve our forecasting?
Gotcha. Let's go back to the point that you started with yourself with regards to usage data. It's been quite clear that it's been very central to your success and your journey. I'm curious to understand, how do you actually manage that usage data? And one question as a starting point is, to what level do you have an automated workflow in place as opposed to manual efforts that you need to put into it?
So I think so it's very automated. And I think there's two sides of it. One is for customers within our admin console, which is called Autodesk Account. Those admins, they're getting data, and they're getting a bunch of kind of pre-built reports to see which products tokens are being consumed against, who's using what, how many tokens each user consumed. So they're getting a lot of this pre-built. They can also click a button and download that information into an Excel, or even pull it into a Power BI or a Tableau or a ClickView dashboard to do even further analysis on that. Internally, we've got access to that same data. And so we've got a data store. We're able to put that into a Power BI, and we can look at the various trends for how quickly tokens are being consumed, Tokens actually expire after a year. Oh, I'm sorry if I didn't say this earlier. Tokens are the currency upon which Autodesk Flex operates.
Yep. Now you did mention
So,
that.
okay, so we look at how many tokens are actually at risk of expiration. How many of those are actually consumed before the expiration date? How fast are they being consumed? What's the average token pack size that a customer's buying? So we're looking at all those different things. We're looking at by who bought through a partner versus who bought on our e-store, and then trying to use that data both in terms of forecasting, but also to figure out, hey, what are the things that we should be serving up to the customers? And we also, I mean, we have we do focus groups. Like I mentioned, we had our customer conference back in October. Sat down, got a lot of feedback from customers on what they'd like to see on Flex in the future.
So for me, kind of synthesizing what you've shared with us so far off the back of your journey is that it's been quite important. If I borrow the term that you use, it's important that you have a system that is built up for scale and repeatability.
Mm-hmm.
And when I now listen to how you've set up your quote to cash environment, the access you have and the way the structure you have to usage data, you've kind of set that up in a way to support your business journey to date. And I'm curious, Jeff, now if we pin that to the AI discussion that we had and the unknowns, what will be the challenges and the improvements that you'd like to see? And let's think about it from an ideal quote to cash landscape as you're looking to monetize AI, even though we don't know everything about what is to come. What will be the shortcomings that you would like to improve?
So I'd like to see us be able to, and it's early innings to use a baseball analogy, but it's early days in terms of AI. And so what I'd like to see us do is get better at figuring out the costs of these things as we launch them. And some of that means,
Yep.
hey, maybe I've got to run a long beta or a long early access program. In fact, prior to launching Autodesk Flex, we launched. We had a pilot with some larger customers. We had 15 large-ish customers that were spending greater than six figures of US dollars with us. We had 10 or 15 of these customers on a precursor to Flex, where we were looking, and this is where we're doing it manually. The sales reps were hand holding the customers. We were working with partners. It was on a very small scale, and we were actually able to take the learnings from that and then apply it to the mass market and sell Flex in quantities as low as 100 tokens or 300 US dollars. AI, I think we're in that same early innings right now, where we're trying to figure it out. There are a lot of ideas out there from the product teams, some things even out there in beta, and I think we're looking at, hey, how do you build it like a fare estimator for Uber, where you say, hey, I want to run this job, and it immediately spits back an answer and says, great, that's going to cost you 50 euros to run that job? Or do we start to classify jobs into small, medium, and large and say, hey, jobs with these characteristics are going to cost 10 euros. Jobs with these other characteristics will cost 100, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the piece that we're working on right now to make sure we fully understand, as these new services are released by the product teams, to make sure we have a handle on them. And that's hard because AI in some cases it's indeterminate.
Gotcha. Jeff, before we start to wrap up, I also want to talk to you about your go-to-market, because as your business model has shifted, of course, that has an impact on your go-to-market as well. So maybe just walk us back to how it looked like your go-to-market. I would assume through distributor setup way back in time, and then how it is today. And what I would also like to understand is the shift that you've done in your business model, primarily towards Flex and the usage base, the impact that it might have had on your go-to-market.
So when I started at Autodesk, our go-to-market was largely through distributors. In fact, there used to literally be boxes of DVDs of AutoCAD sitting in warehouses for our resellers to ship. So we started out primarily reseller based. As time went on, our direct business grew, and I'll say a rising tide lifted all boats. Our resellers' businesses grew as well. But we launched e-stores and our Autodesk stores, so online stores in various markets. That business grew very, very fast because many of these very small businesses, you can think about somebody that wants to buy only a handful of seats. They don't need implementation. They don't need training. Yep. They'd rather go to the store, put down their credit card, buy what they need, and move on. The other area where we saw a lot of growth is with enterprise business agreements. Those enterprise agreements are also on consumption. And so, because those are with our largest customers, and those come with enterprise services, enterprise grade support. We saw a significant growth in that part of our direct business as well. But not to say our reseller business continued to grow. Now, over the past 13 months or so, just over a year, we're transacting directly with customers in many markets, in North America, in Europe, in Japan, and in Australia. We're transacting directly with customers, but partners are still involved. Partners are the ones really entering those deals into Salesforce CPQ. They're the ones that are also working really closely with our customers to close the deal. So they're still very, very involved. But the flow that they go through is a little bit different than they have been historically. And look, we see partners as extensions of ourselves, right? They're providing support to our customers. They're selling to our customers. So our partners are a critical part of our business.
We got a question from Yuri, but I think that you already answered his question with the answer that you gave. But he was curious in terms of how the shift has impacted your direct sales. But I do believe, Jeff, that answer probably addresses all of it. But if you feel like you want to add anything, please do.
Yeah, Uri, it's nice to hear from you. Uri was an intern at Autodesk on my team years and years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just like it was change management for Autodesk, it was change management for our partners. One of the things that we actually did, so we have a set of APIs, we call those partner web services. Yeah. And we provide data on opportunities, customer usage data, prices, and we provide all of those in APIs available to our partners. And then they're able to consume those in their CRM because they're out there, they're selling services to the customers and training. They might be selling other products that aren't Autodesk. And so we spend a lot of time digitizing the channel and really making them more efficient. And that actually, yes, there was change management involved in helping to change their business processes, but that was able to fuel their investment in customer success and some of the things that we've had to invest in because, again, our customers, there are things that they're getting from Autodesk. There are also things that they're getting from their partners.
Jeff, let's wrap up our conversation. And what I would like to kind of hear from you is, first and foremost, congratulations to an amazing journey. You've been there for 14 years and you've been part of this entire fantastic journey that Autodesk has done. What would you say for everybody's listening who want to try to attempt to do a similar kind of transformation? What would be the 2 or 3 things that we really should start looking at tomorrow off the back of your learnings?
Yeah, so look at this point, many companies, and I've referenced a few of them in the conversation, have gone through. So don't. On one hand, I'd say no company is a true snowflake. There are a lot more similarities between companies than you think. So if I go to dinners and events, as I talk to my peers in other organizations, what I learned is there's a lot more the same than there is different. So learn from all the mistakes that people who have gone first made, and don't make the same mistake again. Every business has unique points, and I think you have to think through those. But you'll learn from your peers. Reach out. I think that's number 1. 2, don't underestimate the change management. That's a huge thing, and every function in your company is going to change, and it's to some level. And so your ability, just bring them along. I can tell you, my boss and I, we spent, for a while it was every week, and then it was every month. We spent a lot of time with our executive team, walking them through our roadmaps, what's going to change, what's the impact of that change. And we got a lot of great input from our executive team as part of that. Obviously, they're very supportive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are. But they were able to raise concerns about, hey, have you considered this impact on a certain functional area? In some cases, the answer was yes. We met with them and we've done a workshop and we have a plan. In other cases was, oh, we hadn't thought about that. Let us go back and come back to you with an answer. So the change management is really big. And then the last piece, I think, we talked a little bit about data and automation. Just you think through what are the things that you really need, and what are the outcomes that you're trying to get to, and then you think about how do I get there. But also, I think the other thing, and this I might be contradicting myself here, but you don't have to be at the end of the journey on day 1. So think about what you want to build towards, think about what you want to get to, but how do you establish those proof points that will give people confidence in the strategy? Do you experiment on one product? Do you experiment on one country? Test and learn, because you'll learn a lot of important things from those tests that you can use and apply those to the broader scale of your business.
Yeah. One takeaway from my side, Jeff, having had the opportunity to learn from you today, is in difference to some of the other businesses that I interact with, you guys have gotten the data part right. And I also really appreciate when you mentioned earlier, you need to build for scalability. Because throughout our conversation today, it's been pretty clear to me how you used that you refer to as usage data to either learn from or get back to a customer with that wonderful story saying, hey, you're not using all of your seats. Maybe you should go down a number of seats, or that you've actually shifted your pricing model to usage based with Flex. So I think that that has been a very clear, I would say, capability that you built early on in your journey. And I would say that that I find being quite unique. You'd be surprised how many really large companies are not in the same maturity stage as you are, despite having done subscription business for many years. So just I think a kudos to you guys for realizing that and making those changes early on.
Yeah, one of the things I also say is more of a cultural thing that we've worked towards is when we're trying to run an experiment or make a change, we'll ask, is it safe to try?
Yep.
And I can tell you, I went through this with one of our executives just 2 weeks ago, where we were thinking about making a change and we wanted to run this experiment. And the question that we debated with her is it safe to try? And we got a lot of good feedback. And at one point that it was, hey, I want to run this experiment and I want to learn, but you've got to restrict the scope. And you've got to say, hey, let's try these couple of products, or let's just try it in these countries. Because what if your experiment fails and you're wrong? Well, you want to do that in a way that you don't want to affect your financial results, or maybe even you don't want to affect how salespeople are getting paid. So you want to do these experiments in a way that you'll learn, you'll get a true reaction from the market, but not in a way that could materially damage your business. And so all I ask, hey, is this safe to try, or what could we do to make this safer to try? And I think that's a way that also it disarms people, because people, inherently they go, oh, I'm worried or I'm concerned, and they think about the bad things that can happen, versus you say, is this safe? People get a bit more disarmed. They say, yes, it is. Or if you change these one or two things, then it would be. And in most cases, somebody says, make a small change. As long as I still get the data that I want or can run my experiment, I'm perfectly happy with that.
With that, Jeff, thank you so much. But also thank you very much to everybody tuning in today. If you're interested to learn more about either Autodesk, or if you want to learn more about quote to cash, order to cash, simply just type quote to cash in the comments field, or get in touch with us through other channels and means that you would like, and we'll make sure to kind of get back to you and support in any ways that we can. And Jeff, thank you very much for today's conversation. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you for having me.